Welcome to Three Crosses Farrier Company. I'm Caleb, and we're going to be walking you through trimming one of my favorite horses. This is Lakota. She's been featured in several of my videos already. She is a big Clydesdale draft horse, and she stands about 18 hands at the wither and weighs right around 2,000 pounds. I've talked a lot in previous videos with Lakota about the struggles with trimming and draft and some of the things I really like about trimming draft horses. Some of the hazards of trimming a draft horse. One of the things is if a draft doesn't want to stand still, short of putting them in stocks, you can't really make them stand still. Lakota is getting a little older. She's getting a little stiffer. So you're going to see throughout the video where she kind of pulls on me and moves around. I think a lot of this has to do with some of her arthritis. Also, I think horses have bad days just like people, and this wasn't a particularly good day for her. She just didn't really want to be involved in the trimming process. Normally, she's a really good girl and stands really quiet, but this just wasn't her day. Right here, I am just kind of getting that foot opened up enough where I can kind of start to see things. I start with my nippers over my knife with these draft horses because it saves some time. These are such big feet. If I did everything, with my knife and didn't use my nippers a little bit, I'd be here a lot longer. So getting this horse done efficiently is important. They're a live breathing animal. You can't spend all day on them and expect them to stand there. They're going to lose patience. They're going to want to do something else. Here I'm defining my bars as well as getting rid of some of that dead material in the sole. Again, I've explained this to many people. It seems like this question comes up in every video that I do. What do horses do in the wild? Horses in the wild travel enough ground that they exfoliate. Through abrasion, they get rid of all the dead sole. Horses in captivity, like Lakota here, don't travel enough miles a day. And so that's one of the things we do for them is we exfoliate all the dead tissue so we don't get any bacteria or thrush or any of that or any of those nasty little things in the hoof and then cause them issues later on. Again, nipping flat is super, super important. I can't stress it enough. It saves time on your rasp. Now with me nipping around the hoof, you can kind of start to see where the flares have developed. In draft horses, because of their weight, they have a ton of flare. Instead of growing down in most cases, they grow out like Lakota is doing here. I'm not taking off a ton of length, but she looks really long, and she is. We would describe this as a top down. We need to gather this foot from the top. So we're going to trim off what we think we can on the bottom, because if you look at this hoof, you'll see the concavity. There's some concavity, but there's not a lot. You also notice that the heels had moved way forward of the back of the frog. So we're going to try to fix that as well. Gathering the foot up brings it back to where it should be. I've had comments that people say, well, you shouldn't rasp the outside of the hoof wall. It weakens it. And if you rasp it too much, yes, but it weakens it even more if that hoof wall is pulling away from the rest of the hoof and it's just flare. It's not good hoof wall anyway. It's not viable hoof wall anyway. So we're going to address that here. You can also see that she had a little less flare right there in the lateral toe quarter is what we call it, but it's the portion of the toe that is just off center moving towards the back of the hoof. So I have to apologize in this video. You're not going to have a lot of audio. I'm sure I'll get the comment. I can't hear the nipper. I can't hear the hoof sound. I can just hear your voice. That's because this client and I tend to talk politics when I work for him. We tend to disagree. We don't necessarily disagree on maybe the problems. We disagree on how to solve the problems. So we get into some pretty heated debates. we actually really enjoy it. I enjoy it. He enjoys it. Little mental exercise, and hearing a different point of view is always a good thing. But because of that, I ended up muting most of this because it probably would get us banned. So here I'd like to talk about the Hoof It USA hoof stand. I got to give them a huge thank you. We just got back from the National Farrier Convention, the AFA's National Farrier Convention, and in Reno. This year it was in Reno, and it was absolutely amazing. I'd like to thank them for making it possible for us to go. We got to hang out at their booth a little bit, talk about horseshoeing, talk about the hoof stands, why I like them. I got to meet some of the coolest farriers in the country, who are all amazing. They're absolutely stellar individuals, super nice, answered all my stupid questions, things that I was like, I just don't understand, like help me out, make me a better shoer. They were super humble, super amazing guys. It was amazing. We'll actually be doing a video here, I want to say probably over Thanksgiving, and I'm going to take you on a little tour. I did a bunch of videoing while I was there. We're going to try to give you a vibe and what it was like. It'll be a little different than our normal content, but you'll get to see some of the coolest farriers and some of the best farriers in the country doing what we love. The Hoof It USA hoof stand, which is what I'm using right here, we had several farriers come up and they asked us some questions, so I was gonna address that really quick here because this is a good example. So this is a big, heavy horse, and she is putting all her weight on me here. The Hoof It USA hoof stand uses it's basically a bicycle clamp to hold the post in place, unlike like the hoof jack, which uses a screw that you screw into the post. And I have had issues with that post, that screw, not holding and then stripping the cradle, the post cradle, and eventually bending the screw, and then it won't screw in and out. Hoof It USA's design, not only does it hold up a horse like this that's being really, really, really heavy, it actually does more than that. It's super easy to undo. It doesn't strip out. It's a great design. I happen to really like it. So that's my little ad plug. But again, thank you, Hoof It USA, for allowing us to go to the AFA. And we'll have a new video on that here soon. You'll see that I'm doing what I'm addressing from the top, the flare, and addressing the long hoof from the top. So she wasn't super long on the bottom, but she's definitely super long on top. You would, if you set the foot down before I address the foot, you'd go, God, that looks really long. That doesn't look right. And you're correct, because she's growing out, not so much as down. So we still have to address flare and distortion from the top. You can see here where it's kind of rounding up. That's some flare. That's where the hoof wall was actually pulling away from the laminae. And the only way to fix that is getting rid of that flare. She's really, really leaning on me here. I'm using all my weight to hold her in place. This really makes you realize you need to work out, do something to be a little healthier. Because this kind of horse will take it out of you quickly, and you'll be sitting there breathing hard. Rasping is all cardio for competitions and things like that. Like shoeing competitions, you can't use power tools in some of them. And so you actually have to do everything, rasp the shoe, everything with the rasp. And so you definitely have to be in shape to do this. That's a subject I haven't really covered before. One thing about shoeing horses is if you want to do this long term and you want to keep up with it, you have to eat healthy. You have to take care of yourself, because basically as a farrier, you're selling your body to do this job. And trust me, you only get to do so many horses before your body says you can't do anymore. So a lot of guys will tell you, don't do bad horses. Don't do things that are going to get you hurt, because you're not going to get a do-over. You get what you get. You take care of yourself. I don't think clients sometimes realize that, how physically demanding this job is. And a big one is keeping your weight down. You're bent over. If you have a bunch of extra weight, that's more wear and tear on your back and your tendons and your muscles. I have issues. My back is great. I get that question. Doesn't this hurt your back? Actually, my back does fine. It's my knees and ankles that hurt usually. Again, same process here. We're getting rid of all the dead tissue in the bottom of the hoof. We're defining the bars. Again, I'm going to use my nipper. It's going to save me a little bit of time. Trying not to take out too much bar as I go. Just the dead part. Get down to live tissue. There we go. This just kind of gets me a benchmark. These are landmarks. So if you can see your bars, that gives you an idea where the rest of the hoof lays, where your frog lays. You use all of these things to determine how much of the foot you can take off. And if you look at where our bars are, and then if you look at where our heels are a good inch in front of the widest part of the frog. And we need those heels to be back at the widest point of the frog, not an inch in front of it. So with our trim, that's one of the things that we're going to assess. People ask, well, how do you know how much to take? That is how we know. We use those landmarks, those reference points, to tell us what we can take off. If you look, you can see just a little line. Now I'm using that line as a guide point. You can see it right under my nippers, right kind of off the side. Watch my nippers right there. You can see that line. I'm kind of just following that line around. That's your benchmark, or your reference point, if you will. Again, now you're going to see I'm going to take the heels back. Now people ask, why don't we shoe Lakota? Well, she's in a pasture. She doesn't really do anything other than sit in her pasture. If she was to go out and actually start pulling a cart or doing something a little more strenuous, we would probably put shoes on her. But at this point, she's living her best life in a pasture with plenty of water and plenty of food. And so there's no need to put shoes on her. Again, I'm addressing the flare. You'll notice I didn't take off a lot of hoof wall from the bottom, but I'm going to address it from the top. Again, you'll see I'm not taking much in that lateral toe. That lateral toe quarter, that's where she's breaking over. This is kind of a general rule on most horses. Most horses break over to the lateral toe. They break over to the outside just a little bit, just off of center. And this is pretty accurate across the board. There's a few exceptions to the rule, but not many. Again, run your rasp nice and flat. Keep it. The flatter you keep that rasp, the better your trim's going to come out and the less work you're going to have to do. If you were putting a shoe on it, it needs to be flat. Going to just take that. See, going to pick that little bit of hook up. And now we're going to finish the top. Again, I use saran wrap. It's what I have in the truck. I've used vet wrap. I've used all kinds of tape, duct tape, all kinds of stuff. But saran wrap seems to be the best thing, mostly because it's on my truck and I can wrap it like this and it's not a big deal. It's not super expensive and it holds the feathers out of the way. Now, if you look at this foot, you can tell that it's still long. It's not long from the bottom, but it is long. So we're going to address all that flare and distortion and get it pulled back. Again, I start with my nippers just to save some time. On a normal horse, I hardly ever use my nippers on the hoof wall. It's all done with a rasp. On these guys, it's probably an extra minute of rasping, which rasping is super hard. It's nipping's actually not that bad. It's the rasping that will get you out of breath. As you can see by the ground and the area around Lakota, it's pretty wet where we're at. We've had a wet fall, a very warm wet fall. So it looks like spring. I mean, the grass that green, we never see that this time of year where we're at. We're kind of in a high desert. So it's been interesting because a lot of the horses that I do, this time of year, it's usually dry and their hooves are not super distorted because it's been super hard. And their hooves are kind of contracted a little bit because of the lack of moisture. But in the last month, we've had so much moisture. I think last night we got like 1.5 inches of rain overnight. So it's been pretty crazy. The environment that the horse lives in has a lot to do with the hoof health. Generally speaking, the wetter the environment is, the poorer the health of the hoof is. Horses generally do best in arid climates, like dry climates. This is why they do so well on the plains. In the toe, you'll see that, again, you'll see to the outside, there's not quite as much distortion. I swap sides to get a little bit better angle on that outside, so I can work all the way back to the heel. But again, you can still see that there's still some pretty good flare right there. You can see it kind of bowing out away from the hoof. I use a Heller XL rasp. I really like it. It stays sharp pretty long. Stays sharp for a pretty good amount of time. As good, or if not better, than a lot of the other rasps I tried. There we go, getting that cleaned up. See, now that hoof is actually starting to look like a hoof. It's starting to take shape. Again, you can see where that hoof was separating from the laminae. So we're going to try to get that gathered back up so it'll grow down where it's supposed to be. And that should about do it for today. Hope you all enjoyed the video.